Okay, so when I say the name Leo Tolstoy, what comes to mind? Probably literary genius, right? Epic novels that are just towering achievements. But what if I told you there were actually two Tolstoys, and that the second one spent his life trying to tear down everything the first one built?
And I'm not just hyping him up. I mean, get this. Fellow literary legend Virginia Woolf called him, simply, the greatest of all novelists. That's the kind of peak we're talking about. He was the undisputed champion of his craft.
I mean, just look at this. The guy had it all. He wrote War and Peace and Anna Karenina, only two of the most famous novels ever. He was a count, born into Russian nobility. He had a huge family, 14 kids with his wife Sonia, and a worldwide reputation. By every possible metric, he was a massive success.
Which brings us to the real puzzle here. Why would a man at the absolute pinnacle of his career, after creating these masterpieces, turn around and call them counterfeit art? Seriously, what on earth happened to Leo Tolstoy?
To really get the transformation, first we've got to understand the man the world knew and adored, Leo Tolstoy, the literary superstar. His rise to fame was, well, incredibly fast. He was born into this ancient line of Russian nobles, grew up on a massive estate, and started making a name for himself as a writer while he was still in his 20s. He basically hit the ground running.
And you can see his journey right here. After his first novel, he actually served as an artillery officer in the Crimean War, which was absolutely brutal and, as you can imagine, totally shaped his later views on violence. Then, of course, came the big ones, War and Peace in '69, and then Anna Karenina in '78, which, fun fact, he always called his first real novel. The man was literally on top of the world.
But here's the thing. It was right there, at the very summit of fame and success, that his entire life just completely imploded.
In the exact same decade he finished Anna Karenina, Tolstoy was just consumed by this gnawing spiritual crisis. He started asking these terrible questions like, what will come of my life? And is there any meaning in my life that the inevitable death awaiting me does not destroy? Suddenly, all the fame, all the money, all the praise, it just felt totally empty, a complete void that left him paralyzed. And listen, this wasn't just some philosophical funk. This was a real life-or-death situation. He wrote in his book, Confession, that he literally had to hide guns and ropes from himself because he was so terrified he would take his own life.
But out of that darkness, a second Tolstoy was born. And he didn't find his answers in literature or high society. No, he found them in a radical, totally literal reading of Christianity that would put him at war with pretty much the entire world.
He became what we now call a Christian anarchist. So what does that even mean? Well, he came to believe that if you take what Jesus said in the Gospels literally, especially the Sermon on the Mount, then you have to reject all forms of human power. No government, no state, and definitely no organized church.
So his new philosophy pretty much boiled down to these core ideas. First, strict pacifism, nonviolent resistance no matter what. Second, a total rejection of the state and the official church. Third, he was completely against the idea of private land ownership. And finally, he started promoting chastity, which, as you can imagine, was a pretty tough sell for a guy with a huge family.
His ideas were this really unique mix. On one hand, you have these Christian socialist ideals pulled right from the Gospels. And on the other, he was super influenced by economic theories like Georgism, which basically says that the earth belongs to everyone equally.
And you better believe he didn't keep these ideas to himself. Now, this radical new life set him on a collision course with his family, his society, and the most powerful institutions in all of Russia.
And this is where it all gets incredibly complicated, because you have his ideals on one side and his actual life on the other. He preached giving up all your wealth, but he was still a count living on a massive estate. He argued for chastity, but he was the father of 14 kids. He wanted to give away the copyrights to his books for free, but his wife Sonia, who, by the way, copied War and Peace by hand multiple times, fought him every step of the way. Their marriage has been called one of the unhappiest in literary history.
This one year, 1901, this is the breaking point.
In 1901, the Russian Orthodox Church had finally had enough. For his radical ideas and his constant criticism, they officially excommunicated Leo Tolstoy. Russia's greatest writer was now a formal outcast from its most powerful religious body.
But here is the craziest twist of all. While the literary world remembers the first Tolstoy, the novelist, it's the second Tolstoy, the radical, the outcast, whose ideas would go on to change the world in ways his novels never could have.
Now check out this quote. This isn't from some literary critic, it's from Mahatma Gandhi. He saw Tolstoy not just as a writer, but as a prophet of nonviolence.
And this connection is everything. Gandhi read Tolstoy's book on Christian pacifism, The Kingdom of God is Within You, and it became a blueprint for his own philosophy of nonviolent resistance. The two even wrote letters to each other, sharing ideas across the globe.
And you can literally draw a straight line from Tolstoy's radical Christian ideas to Gandhi's movement for Indian independence, all the way to Martin Luther King Jr. and the American Civil Rights Movement. The thoughts of this one isolated Russian count echoed through the most important nonviolent movements of the 20th century.
So, Tolstoy's story is really a profound challenge to us, isn't it? At the absolute height of success, he decided that a truly meaningful life meant giving up everything we're told to value: wealth, fame, even his own incredible art. And it leaves us with a pretty tough question. In our own search for a meaningful life, what are we willing to question? And what would we be willing to give up?